obsession, fascination, fetish, fragmentation. Why are 9 out of 10 women dissatisfied with some aspect of their own bodies? The beauty industry is the beast.
In a 1-year span, I'd counted over 100 blood transfusions. That whole experience, Lindsay's experience, changed our whole lives. Just changed our outlook on everything. Sometimes you take things for granted that you shouldn't. We all do that, but wow, we don't do that much anymore.
Hello, my name is Ernest Rando with Arkansas Rising, and you're watching Fayetteville Public Television.
One of the most frequent questions that I get from viewers of my artwork is maybe a question of what tips I could give about how to take better photographs. And I think the one that I might give constantly would be to remember that photography is an abstract medium and to make the most of it. And we're here today to talk about one image in particular, which is titled Woman with Sword, and part of a series that was entitled Women and Violence. And in this particular image, which is a Polaroid transfer technique, an original photograph is taken on Polaroid film, and in essence the image from the Polaroid is transferred to a piece of watercolor paper under pressure. And you can see as you look at this image that there is a texture to it that you normally wouldn't find in a photograph, and that was part of the intent, using photography in part of its abstraction to give this image a flavor of having been chipped out of a wall in an archaeological dig. And in fact, in the original image, the way it was presented, it was plastered onto a backing material with wall plaster that was cracked and lent to the effect. The series itself was designed to try to illustrate a few points about the way that female sexuality and violence is typically joined together, especially in advertising images. And there was an attempt to look at how an image of a male portraying violence toward a woman was typically looked at by men as inoffensive, while many women found it very uncomfortable. And that's quite a simplification, but part of the project that initiated this series was an attempt to try to derive images that might reverse those roles, put women in power, put a man in a situation where male sexuality and violence are combined, and to try to perhaps sensitize some men to the concept of how these images are used, and can be very disconcerting, perhaps. This is the second in the series, and it's called Woman with Sword, and it's in essence a remake of a very famous painting that shows Medusa's head after having been decapitated. In the original painting, of course, Medusa's head with the multitude of snakes is being held up, and we've alluded to parts of that in this photograph. The snake on the arm of the woman is a real snake. It was rented for the photograph and was very cooperative in wrapping itself around her arm. And there's another faint snake image on the right arm, a bracelet, a brass bracelet that harkens back to Egyptian motifs. The male head here, which is the rest of the body, of course, is out of the photograph. It's difficult to tell by looking at this photograph whether the man's head is severed or not. And I'm not even going to tell you whether it's severed or not. But actually, right below the photograph where we cut it, you'd see the rest of his body. And you don't know whether he's alive or dead, and which is typical of many of the images that associate female sexuality and violence in advertising. Is an ad for a necklace. Has the woman been strangled the way she's laying on the bed, or not? Most men would say, no, it's just a photograph. Don't, you know, it's nothing to be concerned about. But a lot of women might find that image disturbing. And this, although this is certainly not as graphic and as disturbing as some of the other images in the series of Women and Violence, nevertheless, it shows an image of a woman in power, a woman who is just looks like is either just has or is about to perform an act of violence on this man. The woman's face is cropped out of the photograph very purposely, not to protect her identity, more than to simply as a method of indicating that I didn't want that. I mean, I just didn't want a personality associated with this woman. It's all women, and it's timeless. And the timelessness of the image is accented as well by the texture that is seen in the photograph. And that's actually the watercolor paper texture that you're seeing in all of these areas around that almost looks fuzzy. If you were able to look closely at the original photograph, you would see that it's almost a hairy texture, and that's from the wet watercolor paper. It's a very interesting technique, I think. And from a photographic standpoint as well, it illustrates that you can produce photography without expensive equipment. You can produce photography on films that are considered amateurish, like Polaroid films sometimes. And you can produce good images by manipulating photographs, something that many purists would find abhorring. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Ernest Rando with Arkansas Rising, and you're watching Fayetteville Public Television.
Obsession. Fascination. Fetish. Fragmentation. Why are 9 out of 10 women dissatisfied with some aspect of their own bodies? The beauty industry is the beast.
In a 1-year span, I'd counted over 100 blood transfusions. That whole experience, Lindsay's experience, changed our whole lives. Just changed our outlook on everything. Sometimes you take things for granted that you shouldn't. We all do that, but wow, we don't do that much anymore.
So I thought, since our theme this year for the Goddess Festival is The Journey Continues, I would play one of my journey songs. it's kind of just like a little piece of mythology, I guess, a little metaphor about, I guess, the spiritual journey that we all kind of go through, hopefully sometimes in our lives. So, the song is called Gate to the Garden. She walked out of the garden. She felt afraid. She felt desire. But first, she felt she was alone. She was disconnected from the source from which our life flows. Illusions of duality create separate forms. She walked down to the river where she looked in, saw her own reflection, and then she fell in love. She was disconnected from the source from which our life flows. Illusions of duality create separate forms. Me and you, right and wrong, man and nature, man and God. She walked down to the valley to pick some flowers for her watery love. But when the darkness of night fell upon the earth, well, she heard mystical howls, and the wolves, they came and chased her away. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. She went far from the scene, in circles so it seemed, out of sight and out of mind. And when she came to raise her head, she looked up at the gate. The gate to the garden, impenetrable as it was. She knew the secret. She shed her skin and she walked back in. All is impermanent. All is without a self. When she was back in the garden, she was no longer afraid. She felt no more desire. She was one with everything. When she was back in the garden, she was no longer afraid. She felt no more desire. She was one with everything.
Just to see Speaking of poultry, which is actually a pretty cool way to do that.
Very good.
Lisa wrote a poem, the Poets of Arkansas, or
The Great Chicken Poets
the
of
Great
Arkansas.
Chicken Poets of Arkansas.
Are you ready for the Great Chicken
I'm
Poets
ready
of
for the
Arkansas?
Great Chicken Poets of Arkansas.
Let me backtrack in case anyone has joined us late. I am from San Francisco, and I drove across country and came to Arkansas actually by accident. And when I arrived in Siloam Springs at the visitor center, I had this experience recorded here in this here poem, which is a true story. It's called The Great Chicken Poets of Arkansas, or You Say Tomato and I Say Tomato. Clearly, she didn't want to be there fielding tourists at the Visitor Information Center, Siloam Springs, Arkansas. Boredom dripped out in her sighs and fingers grazing tired across a map. Here a river, there a lake, everywhere a good time. Nevertheless, she was helpful, if by rote. Miss Arkansas Information at last became inexplicably animated as I neared the exit. Tourism is very important to Arkansas. It's the number 2 industry? Yes, right after poetry. I perked clean out of my interstate days. Nobody told me poetry was big business in Arkansas. Poetry, I repeated, incredulous. Oh, yes, she puffed. Chicken, turkey, all kinds of poetry. Well, I'd just come from a cowboy poetry festival in Oklahoma, so why not chicken poetry? My informant chirped merrily, why, there's Tyson and Cargill and no doubt famous Arkansas chicken poets, I deduced. Inspired by my interest, she crowed, yep, we've got more farms than anywhere else in America. Farms? Ah. Everything I really needed to know about the Arkansas accent, I learned in that exchange with the poultry pep gal at the visitor center, Siloam Springs, Arkansas.
But you didn't turn around and go back.
No, I didn't. It really had to sink in for a while. The enormity of what I had just experienced.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good. And you know, we had so much fun here today, and I wish you'd all put your hands together for Jan for putting this all on, and the sound people and everyone. Lots of fun. Lots of fun. The first song that we're going to do is one that I wrote this last, a little over a year ago. I started going through my midlife crisis or growth or whatever, and I was over Peggy's one day, and she kind of inspired me to write this song.
We were looking at there was a musical act coming to town, these two women that were going to be playing, and something inside me snapped. It was like the June Cleaver inside of me wanted to get a shag haircut and a pair of boots and become a bitch.
So the song is called Time for a Change. I'm gonna buy some red boots, the cowboy kind, dye my hair to match 'em and drink white wine. I'm gonna get a tattoo on the side of my hip, collar insert for the sake of it. I know my man's gonna think I'm strange. Time for a change, time for a change, turn my world around. Time for a change, inside out and outside down. I'm gonna learn about things that would shock my ma, speak out about it just like my pa. I'm gonna do what I want, where and when, find a new religion, something kind of zen. I know my man's gonna think I'm strange. Time for a change, time for a change, turn my world around. Time for a change, inside out and upside down. change. Inside out and upside down. Inside out and upside down. Inside out and outside down. Thank you. Oh, that was fun.
It's called Gracious, and it's dedicated to my friend Sky. Thank you for magic revived. Thank you for life realized. Gracious is how we survive. Once I was blinded by fear. Voices of doubt kept me here. How did so much of me disappear? Thank you for magic revived. Thank you for life realized. Gracious is how we survive. I've had my chance to play. I have my chance to say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for magic revived. Thank you for life realized. Gracious is how we survive. How we survive. We will survive. Thank you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
The Champion Jig.
Politics in general and jobs that don't pay enough, 40-hour work weeks, books full of boring stuff, schools that should teach but kids don't learn a thing. These are a few of my least favorite things. Healthcare that won't heal and how people treat the earth, paying tolls and taxes, disbelief in self-worth, bitter cold winters that cut into spring. These are a few of my least favorite things. Religions that claim they're true, don't get me started. Standards that double and people cold-hearted. Judgment and bias when freedom don't ring. These are a few of my least favorite things. All the lying, all the killing, when I'm depressed and sad. I add that to all of my least favorite things, and then I feel really bad. Feel like Julie Andrews or something.